There you go. I should be able to hear you as well. Hello.
Well, let me see. Yes, Zach, I'm hearing you. I'm trying to get. Do you hear me?
Yes, I hear you just fine.
Great. Because I have like two screens. I'm trying to pick up which one. Actually, the second monitor right now. So can you see Blender?
I do see Blender.
Okay, great. Can you see what I'm seeing in front of me?
Yeah. It looks like one of your eyebrows is pretty big.
And one of my eyes are very, very microscopically small. So, and as you can see here, even there are even smaller ones.
Now, are those joined to the action? Are those all joined together? Are you sure?
Yes, sir.
Can you show me?
Hang on a second. Oh yes, I believe Control Up and yeah. Tab. So there you go. That's how it looks like.
Okay.
I'm selecting right now the object. So.
Okay. Well, if it's becoming what I would do probably in your case, I'm wondering, do you still have a mirror modifier on those eyes? Or any modifiers at all? Because you got some really weird things. Yeah, okay, hang on just a moment. It seems like you got some really weird things happening to the geometry.
Yes.
Here's what I want you to do. Can you select all of the faces for just the eyes, including the eyebrows, please?
Okay. Okay, the faces of the eyes, like this one. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, so face. So this one, and Control L. So like so. Okay, and for the rest of them.
Yes, sir. As well as the eyebrows.
Okay. Control L. And Control L. Control L. And for the other side as well.
Yes, please.
Okay. And more. Oops. Okay. Shift. Control L. Okay. Done.
Now, just create a new layout for me with those. So hit U.
U. And unwrap.
Yep.
Okay. There you go.
And I had a little bit of an update issue. Okay, there's got to be something very strange going on with your geometry on the left-hand side, because you're getting good behavior on one side and bad behavior on the other. Do you have any doubled vertices or anything going on over there on the left-hand side?
On the left-hand side.
See, because you'll notice what I'm seeing on the right. Okay, that's camera right. On the camera right.
The right is the perspective. The left is the UV layout.
Correct. And in your 3D view, it looks like the character's left eye, the eye that's on camera right now, looks just fine. The other one looks really strange. So I'm wondering if that has anything weird going on with the geometry, such as maybe doubled vertices or anything particularly odd of that nature.
We can actually give it a try right now. So I will select the vertex and.
Not that side. Actually, I'm not worried about that side at all.
That side, you mean?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Sorry. It's the left. Yeah. Okay.
This side looks normal.
Okay, this side. So there you go. So it is one.
Okay.
Basically. Okay. So basically, all of them one as well for the eyebrow. So, okay, it's not planar anymore. But
all right. Well, in this case, if I was in your shoes, I would probably just remirror just those pieces. So you would have to separate out the eye and just remirror it.
Okay, so basically my problem is just only the eyes or the rest of the objects, because somehow it's like, as you can see here, I mean, so this is only the problem is just only the left part, so the eyebrows. What about these parts? I mean, for example, these ones, which I actually keep kind of difficult for me to recognize. What are they right now?
What I'm seeing there, well, remember you do have sync mode over in your UV editor. So if you take a look down at the bottom of your UV editor, there's if you click the sync mode button, you can use that and then select the parts that are confusing you. Over in the UV editor.
Okay. Let me hit B, hurry.
Now go over to the 3D view and hit, say, the point key over on the numpad. You should fly right over to it.
Yeah, see like how these stuff looks like? I mean, a couple seconds ago this eye was normal, but as you can see here, this bottom part is actually looking like so.
Well,
so everything feels like exploded.
It doesn't.
That's what I'm talking about.
That just looks like you've got a very small sampling area, and so you're getting just a little bit of blurring of the texture. That doesn't look completely outside the norm from where I'm standing. It's just that one eye just looks really, really... It got mapped really, really largely, and that's causing some strange issues.
Actually, there seems to be a lot of doubled... the UVs generally, I'm just looking at the body pieces, there's two... Oh, that's the mirror. There was a mirror in there at some point.
Yeah.
When you UV'd the body as well, the bit at the bottom of your screen. Those two pieces...
At the bottom of the UV editor.
At the bottom of the UV editor.
At the bottom of the UV editor, okay. Yes, okay, I have as well. Yeah, this is one of those things which I really don't know where they came from as well. I mean, I didn't have... a little bit confusing here, but okay, I have a better idea. Like, is there any quick way of, like, refixing the thing instead of, like, I mean, I don't know about undoing. Probably I don't have this infinite way of undoing. I believe have this huge queue. So what is the best solution? In my case, the fastest one, just to, like, not to be completely dropped off away from you guys while we are doing this stuff live here.
Well, you could just you can kind of make some of it up as you go. See, here's what's throwing me off, and I can't necessarily point to, like right now, the eye that you're looking at over in the 3D view. You've got a lot of broken bits and pieces. Like each one of those individual faces is being mapped separately. That must be something strange going on with your geometry.
Could it be, for example, could it happen that the same face have two same layouts?
You haven't. Sorry, I've just noticed in your scene, in your what's it called, the list of objects on the top right.
The outliner.
So the outliner. Yes.
You've got eyebrows 1 and eyebrows 2 and eyebrows and and character body. They're not all. You haven't joined them all together. That's why they're coming out a different size and in different places.
But you see, probably hang on.
Move.
Because this is okay. Let me hide this out. So I will invisible.
Or just hit G and try moving it.
Yeah, you see, like, here you go. I've hidden everyone. So if I hit Tab, if I hit A, okay. Now this is my UV layout. I have actually hidden everyone except for my camera and my eyebrows.
I would unwrap it now, myself.
Right now, okay, so you unwrap. Give it a second, and somehow my eyebrows here have been ignored. These parts have been ignored, this as well. And I've again got these strange unproportional thing going on.
Do me a favor, while you got everything selected, just tap spacebar and type out remove doubles. I just want to know.
Okay, but I'm 100% sure that I have doubles. But anyway, okay.
Let's just double check. Okay, I didn't remove anything. That's good. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Real quick, Seth did ask if I make an island larger in the UV window, will it have more detail and more pixels? Absolutely. It's taking up more texture space. Mohammed, I am unsure as to what you have done with the geometry here that is causing us. Yeah, something is definitely out of whack with the model, and I can't break it all down and identify it right here. So if you're
sure.
Now for the purposes of just following along, just so you can see the process and what we're doing, one thing you can do if you don't have a previous save to go back to, you could take just a moment and just unwrap a single sphere, like bring in a UV sphere, lay it out real quick, and you should be able to follow along with the process that I'm going to go through. Or if you want to just take some notes and then follow along with the video later, then that'll be entirely your prerogative.
No, okay, and I would love actually to follow you like right now live, because it would be like easier to grasp everything. But anyway, so basically, like grab a separate sphere other than the one which we have right now, and just simply try to unwrap it and so on. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, I think you could easily see the process that I'm going to be going through using just that method.
All right. Thanks a lot.
No problem at all. I just trying to think. Did you
Would it be like remodel the whole thing again, or?
Well, I mean, if you were really looking for practice, it wouldn't necessarily be the worst idea in the world. Actually, you know what you could do? You know what you could do for now?
Yeah.
Delete out the eyes.
Okay.
Just delete them.
So
Make them go away.
Save a copy of this scene before you do that,
save as?
so that you can look at it afterwards after the recording's over. See if you can figure out what it is.
Oh no, V3.1 or V1. Okay, save as window. Okay.
Because what I'm seeing right now is that really the eyes are giving you the most grief.
Probably.
So
okay, so delete the whole eyes, the whole thing.
Yeah, the eyes, the eyebrows, the whole thing. You're basically going to have a faceless little ball, but you can still follow along with everything else at this point.
So delete all?
Yeah.
Ooh, no, that's a bad idea. Okay, delete and only faces?
Yep.
Oh, hang on.
Just faces.
It doesn't... edges and
No,
faces.
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 Yeah.
Aha, there you go.
This
is the one.
Yeah, that'll kill it.
Control L, F, and L. Delete F. Okay.
There we go.
Now we're starting to see some problems. Look, you still got those floating little pieces that weren't joined in.
I actually never seen those before.
So undo.
No. Keep going. I can't let this hold us up anymore.
Oh, yes,
Sorry.
yes. Apparently these are the seams, by the way.
Then you are actually ripping your geometry apart as opposed to just making seams.
I press Control E and mark seam.
Well,
so basically I've done this. So let me show you right away. No. Oh my god, because I pressed the Alt and, for example, and Control E and mark seam. Okay, this one. So I selected this one for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So somehow, in some certain way, probably.
I mean,
it has done something strange.
I'm just gonna tell you straight up. After doing this kind of thing for years, you probably clicked on something and didn't even notice, man.
Sure thing.
I mean, and I've done it so many times myself, but we are seeing the crux of the problem right here.
Yeah.
But go ahead and go ahead and clean the eyes out for now, and then you should be able to follow along just from there. And then in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and try to move forward.
Sure thing. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mohammed.
Thanks a lot for you.
Okay, and let's see. I was wondering if you could check and see if my UVs for my unwrap looks correct. No, I'm just going to give you the following, because I'm not even done with mine yet. As long as everything that you have is somewhere inside this window and you know generally what things are, then you should pretty much be good to go. I don't want to get you guys too caught up in the concept of right and wrong when it comes to these UV layouts just yet. Okay, so I'm going to bring the hat in now. And the hat is actually going to fit pretty nicely right in here. Now we just need to get the pieces of the eye in. We're going to start with the biggest pieces first. So we'll just grab both of these and hit Control L, and I'll move these over. And now we have the next smallest pieces. These will be the irises. We'll hit Control L and move these over. And then the pupils, which I'll just move over individually. And I'm going to use sync just to make sure I know which one's which. And thank you for that. So,
do L in the...
Yeah. There we go. And that should be good enough for now. So there's the right eye. Make sure that that's on the right side as well. Actually, alright, so these just need to be reversed. Let me turn off sync mode. So there's our pupils. And just one more time, I'm going to double check and make sure that this is, okay, that is the camera right eye. I like kind of pretending like I'm looking right at the character. So technically his left, but I'm calling it right just because I'm looking right at his face. Okay, so now we just have these little bits and pieces of the eye remaining. We have little caps there. We've got these little caps here as well. Now these should be parts of the pupil. Also, these are kind of rotated around, which doesn't really matter. I'm just going to stress that it doesn't really matter, but I'm going to fix it anyway. So let's see here. If I fly over here, this is the top, and this is the top. So they both need to spin counterclockwise. So let's go ahead and turn those. And we'll rotate, and I'll just hit Control and stand those up. Separate them a little bit. We'll go back over to link mode. And that's the top, and that's the top. So good. These also need to rotate counterclockwise. We'll turn off link mode. Grab everybody. Control L. Rotate, hold Control, stand that up. Control L, rotate, hold Control, stand that up as well. And that's a little off, which is okay, but I'll straighten it out a little bit anyway.
You say I'm the obsessive one.
I do, Gav, I really do.
I learned from the master.
Okay, so now let's go ahead and move the eyebrows over. I'll let you check over my inbox sometime, Gav, and then you can tell me the value of making sure that I'm getting everything to at least some level of understandable precision that everybody can follow.
Oh, I'm not.
It's all good. It's all good.
You're far more lax than I am about
right.
those. I would just flatly ignore anyone who submitted it wrong after being able to basically read basic instructions.
Easy there.
Not that I'm bitter.
No, not that you're bitter at all. Okay, let's see. Now back over here, this is going to be the left eyebrow, and that's the bottom of it. So I need to flip this around and move it to the other side. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll rotate. I'll just spin it around. I can just arbitrarily rotate it. It doesn't have to be perfect by any means in this case. Let's turn sync mode back on and double check this guy. Okay, the same thing. It just needs to be rotated around. So we'll turn off sync mode. And rotate this around as well. Now, we have these little bits and pieces that kind of came along for the ride. We just need to know which one is the top and which one is the bottom. But I'm not going to stress that really in this case. Just to kind of speed things along, I'm just going to put the insides of the pupils near the pupils, since they're all really just going to get the same color anyway. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then the inside of the irises near the irises. And the inside of the whites of the eye, you guessed it, near the whites of the eye. So as long as they're in the vicinity, I'm just fine with that. Now here's the backs of the eyebrows. And these are going to be invisible, so I really don't care which side goes where. And again, in our case, they're also going to get the same color anyhow. And this is probably the back of that piece of fabric at the base of our collar. So I'm just going to grab that and move that over here near its counterpart. Actually, I'm going to use a little bit of my texture space here for that, so I can space things out a little more. Okay, so now I've got a layout. Is it the best layout ever? Well, probably not, but it does everything I need it to do. I can see what each part is. I've got an organizational system that I can read, and everything is flat, and everything is generally pretty proportional. That's all this really needs to be. What I want to do now is pause the video for just a few minutes, and I want you guys to create your layouts. Now, I probably won't be able to wait for each and every one of you to get done, but when we come back, we'll be ready to move on to the next thing. Jim Ackerman asked a question earlier. He said, when you initially unwrapped the individual objects, would it have been easier to lay out individually? Would Blender have remembered? Well, that's the thing about it. since we were laying each one of those out individually, Blender, when it tries to unwrap, attempts to fill the entire texture square with each and every individual piece, so you don't get any sense of proportion with all of your pieces. They'll all be scaled to about the same size in texture space, but it won't be particularly useful to you, which is why we do the final layout to get everything proportional. Now, up to this point, you didn't really need those individual layouts. I was doing that really just to kind of show you the tool and get you used to it. Also, it's a great way to test and see if your seams are working, because as you saw, like with the hat, if you missed one of those seams, you don't get two separate panels. So it's a good idea to test that stuff first. But then everything that you really need to be proportional, you can do one last final layout to get everything sort of to the same size.
You don't really do them as separate objects. If you were going sort of hyper real and had, you know, an eyeball with veins,
right,
and pupils with different reflection, and with
that
separate textures.
Somebody asked a question earlier, and I don't know if I ever got a chance to answer it. Somebody asked if they could just have separate textures for everything, or use separate layouts for each individual part without joining. You can, but it's one of those things where your mileage is going to vary from mine. It works just fine, though. You just have to handle your texture or textures plural a little differently than we will. Is our character supposed to have a pattern all over him? Mine is just white. White is just fine, but if you have applied the texture we created earlier, and let me just show you real quick, and we're still recording, so this should be fine. Let me get over here, get out of wireframe view. See, like mine is pretty much just white right now as well, but we created that texture earlier, and if I have that applied, like so, over in the image and UV editor, and I hit Alt-Z, then you can see that, at least temporarily, but I'm not going to leave it that way for now. Okay, I'm going to pause for just a couple more minutes, and then we're going to move on from here and start the video back up. And we're back. Sorry if I was talking right as I started recording again. Martin Braille had a question asking if I could check out his screen, so I thought I would go ahead and bring the video back up before I did that. Hello?
Hey.
Hey. What you got?
Yeah, just a second. It looks as if eyes are almost transparent. I don't know if you can see. Maybe it's just a coincidence. But there's it's like blue here right above the eyes, where the eyes would be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's just a coincidence if I check my here. Maybe this will be easier for you to show. But I don't know if you can see if I go out of the edit mode, it looks like my eyes are half disappearing.
From what I'm seeing, it looks like that may be an optical illusion. You've got a lot of noise on your end, clicking of some sort.
Clicking? You mean my sound, or?
Yeah, it's coming from your microphone. It's really harsh, clicking and grinding of some sort. Is your chair squeaking?
No, but the headset is.
Oh, okay. Yeah, your head's. You just hold still because it's really hard to hear. What I'm seeing right now, this may just be an optical illusion because you have no shading whatsoever in this view, so I wouldn't stress about it just yet. I think everything looks fine. You're just getting kind of a funny illusion because you're trying to map everything out to a checkerboard.
All right, just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, you should be okay for the time being.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Zach.
Mm-hmm. All right, and let me go ahead and mute Martin again. And I think with this, we should be pretty much ready to move on. And it said, yeah, I cleared my doubles, but I have some mesh UV stuff that I shouldn't have. I have no idea what to do. Wolf, at this point, you're really going to need to consider just following along with the video from here on, man. We've spent a pretty good chunk of time rolling through this now. Okay, so at this point, we are pretty much ready to go ahead and create our UV layout. We're ready to export this. So make a note of this process. It's actually very, very easy, but you do need to be aware of how it works. So what you're going to do is while you're in edit mode, and this is where it will kick you and you will get confused and you will start asking questions and you'll start panicking because you don't see what I see. Take a look at your image editor right now and jump between edit mode and object mode. Notice how you get some changes in menu. You want to be in edit mode because you need the UVs menu. Go to export UV layout. And you see I've got all kinds of stuff in here. I have all kinds of temporary stuff that I've been working on and research images. I'm going to call this ball character underscore class underscore UV layout. Notice it's in PNG format. Go ahead and export that out. So that's done, and that was easy, right? Now, we will be able to open that up at this point, which is great. Now, the next thing we're going to do from here is we're going to bake out ambient occlusion. Now, this is kind of fun, and it can panic a few people if you do not click exactly what I click. So I'm going to take this as nice and slowly. It's not really that tricky, but you do need to pay attention, okay? If you need to, jot some stuff down. So first off, do you remember that texture we created? If you didn't create it, you need to do that now. So all I did to create a texture was I made sure I had my entire character selected in edit mode, and I clicked the plus button. I gave the texture a name, I unchecked alpha, and I checked UV test grid. The UV test grid is kind of irrelevant at this point, but I thought I'd mention it. And I named it ball character underscore class underscore AO. You can name it whatever you want as long as you can find it later. You just need to make sure that that is applied to your character. And you can test that just by coming over here to the 3D view and hitting Alt-Z. If you see that checker pattern, you know you're good to go.
Are you going to be asking for textures to be sent for homework, or are they going to be baked in?
They will need to be. We'll get to that. Please don't start talking. You're jumping way ahead. You're jumping way ahead.
Just thinking in terms of naming.
As long as they know what it is, it's fine, because you can remember all of your textures can be included in a blend file. That's something that we talked about actually in Blender Fundamentals. All is good, promise. Okay, so now moving on from here, we need to bake out ambient occlusion. So over in my scene settings, now that's inside your properties panel, you click on scene, like so. Actually, I'm sorry, it's under your world settings. So not next to world. I'm sorry, next to scene you have your world settings. Looks like a little globe. Turn on ambient occlusion. Make sure that that is active. Okay. Now the only other thing we're going to do, and no, I just want to point this out. Right now under gather, we're set to ray trace and our samples is set to 5. Just make a note of that. Just be aware that that's how that is. Then we're going to jump over to our render settings. And under render settings, we're going to go all the way down to the very bottom, and it's real easy to miss. There's a section at the very bottom called Bake. Expand that. You want to change bake mode from full render to ambient occlusion. Now you do want to check the normalize checkbox, and that just means that you're going to be ignoring any material settings, which hopefully aren't going to matter for us, but just in case, it's a good idea to check normalized. Now, at that point, you can just click Bake, and let me go ahead and get back into object mode, and select my object, and click Bake, and it's thinking, and there we go. Now, if I hit Alt-Z, we can see the result of that.
Cool.
To check or uncheck ray trace, well, over inside my world settings, under Gather, I have Ray Trace active. And my samples are set to 5, which is why this ambient occlusion pass looks terrible. It just looks awful. I'm going to set this up to 16 samples. Then jump back over to my render settings, make sure I have my guy selected, and just click Bake again. Now it's going to take a little longer to cook out this time, but we'll give it a minute. And we have a much cleaner ambient occlusion pass. Now, if you need to, something you can do here that will kind of make things a little easier. We have our ground plane, which I haven't really named. I could go ahead and do that real quick. We could just call this the ground. I have our backdrop, which I could call this the backdrop. If you switch these off to the renderer, they will not be calculated for ambient occlusion, and that will change the look of your ambient occlusion pass. Just something for you to be aware of. So if I turn off the little camera over here in the outliner for the ground and for the backdrop, and if I bake one more time, which we'll go ahead and just give that a minute to go. Okay, now we're getting errors down the board here.
You haven't selected the.
Yeah, somebody said I'm getting an error. No objects or images to bake to. Actually, I wasn't even looking at my screen. I was looking at other people's things. Just make sure you select your object. If you're getting a no object or image found to bake to, one, you need to make sure that that image was actually assigned to your object. That was critical, and we did that for a reason. You also need to make sure that your object is selected before you click Bake. I'm going to show you something else. Something else you can do is you'll notice that I haven't had my Subdivision surface modifier on here. It's going to be a good idea to have that on before I bake. We are going to be using smoothing. But you can see how I get this kind of chunky result while it's off. And here's the great thing. If I go turn it on, now notice the render is reading 2, so you might as well set your view to 2 as well. And if we bake again, just take a quick look at your screen. Look at what I've got here. See how chunky it is. And we'll bake once more. Xerinx, however you pronounce that, please make sure you ask questions over in the questions panel of the webinar. I've got to keep those questions in a single place. And there you go. Look how much smoother and cleaner my ambient occlusion pass is now. So up to this point, I haven't been using that subdivision surface modifier, but it's a good idea to have it on and have it applied before you do any baking. Also, there's some banding taking place. That's just showing me where my seams are in my UV window. I'm not too stressed about that, but you may want to just double check and verify that you had smoothed everything out. So that's in my toolbox. Just hit T and smooth. We've done that a few times up to this point. All right, I lost you while baking. So you added a sub-D modifier and then rebaked, right? Yes, I did. And Zach, where do you improve the AO? Don't get that setting. Yes, you do. It is going to be under your world settings, down underneath Gather. You should be using Ray Trace mode, and you're just going to increase your samples. I set mine up to 16, but do be careful. If you crank that up too far, it can take forever to do a bake. Actually, on your computer, 16 might take a little longer than it does on mine. It's entirely possible. Now, let's see. Yeah, if you're baking and you can't hear me, I do apologize. That's just going to be something on your end where your entire computer might be getting eaten up. Blender A, I have no idea what you mean. Oh, you only struggle to hear me when I am baking. Well, I'll try not to do that anymore then. This should be good enough for our purposes anyway. We don't really need too much. Let's see. I'm still seeing the checkered board instead of the white shaded. Let me shoot through this one more time, just so that everybody is kind of on the level. So what I'm going to do is go back over to my object in edit mode, and I'm going to select everything. And I'm going to clear out the texture that's applied. So everything should suddenly be white. Also, just so that there's no visual confusion on the screen, I'm going to turn off the visibility of the backdrop and the ground. So all we should be seeing right now is just the character. Okay, I'm going to create a brand new texture. I'm going to call this one temp underscore AO underscore bake. I'm going to turn off alpha, and I'll go ahead and turn on the UV test grid and click OK. Because I had everything selected over inside of edit mode, this gets applied to our character. Now, with that, we should be ready to bake. So you need to verify your bake settings. First off, over in your world settings, turn on ambient occlusion. Scroll down under gather. Make sure ray trace is on. And I set my samples to 16, but you can set yours to whatever you like. Just don't set them too high. It'll take forever to render. Then under your render settings, at the very bottom, you have the bake area. Make sure you set bake mode to ambient occlusion. Make sure you check normalized. Then make sure that you are in object mode and that your character is selected, and click bake.
And if you've got a subdivision surface, make sure that's turned on as well.
Yeah, by all means, give it a shot, and then if it's really chunky, apply a subdivision surface modifier, or don't apply it, just drop one on. You don't have to actually apply it down to the geometry. As long as it's visible to the renderer, then the renderer will take that into account when creating your ambient occlusion, which is great. And if yours looks a bit dark or anything, that's fine. No problem at all. My eyebrows are completely black, can't figure out what's happening, rest looks very good. Maybe you can look at my screen. Sure thing, Christian, let me go look at your screen.
I'm going to try and guess, and I'd say the normals are flipped.
Yeah, that's my guess as well. You should hey Chris, you should probably check the normals of your eyebrows.
Oh, okay, I have to flip the normals. Oh, that's right, I think. Yeah. Okay, I select eyebrows and spacebar. Flip.
Yeah, flip normals will do it.
Okay, and then I have to recalculate, I think.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Flip normals. Okay.
Does Blender get confused when you're mirroring with normals like Max does?
It hasn't with me, but I'm not going to rule out the possibility. I think it just has a lot to do with what you're doing with your geometry. There you go.
Okay, now it's working.
Yep, problem solved.
And when the CPU is calculating the AO, the voice gets very bad.
Yeah, I understand. That's probably just going to have to be the nature of the beast for a while, but we won't be baking too much more after this. In fact, maybe not anymore at all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let me go ahead and send my screen back over here, and everybody should be pretty much to this point now. Okay, so now there's a few more things we need to do here. I'm going to jump back over to edit mode. Now, you don't have to follow along with this unless you did another bake for some reason, but I'm going to put mine back on my original bake and make sure that that actually does get baked out to a texture. So I need ambient occlusion one more time. Sorry about my voice. I have to do this. Okay, that should be good. I'm sorry for...
I have come to take over you.
Yeah, sorry for having to do that one more time. I had to bake one last time. Our next step is to save this image. When you have a generated image that Blender has made for you, you'll notice that the image menu in your image editor has a little asterisk next to it. This tells you that this image needs to be saved. So I'm going to click over here and choose Save as Image, which is also F3. And I'll go under Textures, and we'll call this, I'm going to check my caps lock, ball character underscore class. Oh, it doesn't really like backspace. Underscore AO. .png, and we'll go ahead and save that out. Now, with that, we are done. We have our texture baked out for ambient occlusion. We have our UVs all laid out and ready to take over into the GIMP to create our texture. So what I'm going to do is give everybody a little 5-minute break. And while we're paused, I want you to go ahead and open up GIMP or your image editor of choice. I will be using GIMP. If you feel happy about following along in Photoshop or whatever, that's fine. Whatever makes you happy. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video now. Okay, so we are back, and we are now inside of GIMP. And I've just opened GIMP up, but I don't really have anything else going on right now. Johan asked earlier, he said, why do we bake it and not render out in the final animation? Well, that's the great thing. When you're calculating ambient occlusion on a frame-by-frame basis, you're really slowing down your render, and anything that you can do beforehand just once will really speed things up. So what we're going to do is use just this single baked version for our character, add it into our material at the very end to keep things looking kind of nice, but we're not going to actually be calculating ambient occlusion during our final render process, and our render will go a whole lot faster because of it. Okay, so now I've got GIMP open. I want to mention that this is not necessarily a GIMP class. I'm not going to be walking you through every single in and out and button, knob, switch, and dial for GIMP. We won't be getting out of here until, I don't know, midnight or something. So for the most part, this will be considered kind of a follow along, do as I'm doing sort of thing. But here's what we're going to do. This is pretty much what GIMP is going to look like for you when you first open it up. We need to get our UV layout in here first. So I'm going to go ahead and click File, Open. And I've got a folder structure that should take me right to where we're going. And there is our UV layout right there. So go ahead and double click that. And there we go. I can use Control on the mouse wheel to zoom out. Okay. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is bring in some dockable tool panels. Now, I do want to just kind of throw this out there. For all of you lovely Windows people, and I don't want to go on to like any kind of level of superiority, who's got the best operating system, so let's not go there. But Windows does have access to GIMP 2.7.5 right now. The binaries are out there, which does unify the interface, and it takes you 4 minutes to set it up and make it look pretty much just like Photoshop. We, however, don't have that. We're still using 2.6, so because that's the only stable release that is on all of the different platforms. So I'm going to go to Windows, Dockable Dialogues, and the big one that I really need to have is layers. I really need to be able to see my layers. I can get away with skipping pretty much everything else for this example as long as I can see my layers. Now, we have just a transparent background for this, and that's a little bit confusing. So I'm going to create a brand new layer, and you can do that with this button in the lower left-hand corner of the Layers panel. You can just click, and you'll get a window that pops up. Now, this window has some settings. You can name the layer, you can set its size, which should be 1024. It's our default size. And you can choose what you want to fill it with. Foreground, background, white, or transparency. I'm going to set this to white and click OK. Excuse me just a moment. Yep, I know. All right. And now I'm going to take this white layer and just drag it underneath the background. And now we can see our UV layout nice and clean against white. Now, it's a good idea to start naming your layers early. So I'm going to take this and just name it white background. And we'll take the UV layer, and we're going to call this character UVs. Now we're going to be doing a lot of work on a layer-by-layer basis here. So the next thing I want to do is make a brand new layer. Actually, you know what? Hang on. Bear with me. What we need to do right now is save this out. So we've brought our UVs in, which is the next critical part of the process. But I want to make sure everybody can do exactly the same things that I'm doing. So I'm going to save this. So File, go to Save, and the name I'm going to give this is ball character class texture. And that should be fine. I can get to that just fine. Now, let's see. Oh, it thinks I want to do a PNG. Let me cancel that. I do not want to do a PNG. I need to do a regular GIMP file. So under Select File Type, you have a GIMP XCF image, and that's how I want to save this. So this needs to be an XCF file. That just means I can get to it again later, because we're about to do something kind of interesting. If you were to open up a browser, like so. This is a perfectly good browser right here. And let's go to www.3dbuzz.com and take a look at this wonderful website. And since you guys are member sponsors, I can just go ahead and jump right to this. Let's go to forums. And yeah, I'll get to PMs in a minute. Let's go over to the member sponsor lounge. And let's go to the streaming video support files. Then, of course, we've got our streaming video support files page. And underneath Blender, there's a new file that I added today called Plaid. And that's all it is. It's just a Plaid image. What I want you to do is select that, then right-click and copy it. Or if you can save it to a location, let's just save it. It'll keep everybody on the same page. So we'll do Save Image As, and I need to put this in my same location as everything else. So let's see. Let's go over to the factory. And there's a copy of it already there, but I just want to make sure everybody's got it. So go ahead and click Save. And yes, we can replace, and that's fine. I want everybody to go get that file.
Factory?
Yeah.
That's cool.
I have an office, I have a factory, and I have a warehouse.
Yeah. No, I will be using that in the near future.
It makes things make sense in my head for where things should be placed. I never have to double check. I always know just at a glance, well, it's something I'm working on, so that's in the factory. Or it's just something I'm storing, that's in the warehouse. And the office I never actually go to. That's my C drive.
No, I like that.
Okay, so once you have this, I want you to go ahead and open it up. So, File, Open, and underneath Textures, you should have Plaid.bitmap. And let's see here. There it goes. And it was hiding from me. If you don't see it, go under your Windows menu and choose it. It's probably just tucked away and hidden. GIMP does that from time to time. It doesn't make me all that happy when it does, but it's just kind of how she works sometimes. And somebody says it's a bit large for a 100 by 100 image. It's also just a straight up bitmap with no compression whatsoever. And you'll see why here in just a second. So once you have this open, once you go to File, or Save As. Now I'm going to set this to a very specific file type. We are going to set this over to a GIMP pattern. Now, I'm going to put this in the appropriate folder where GIMP looks for this sort of thing. If you are on another operating system, I am probably not the guy to ask about this. I don't know where this goes on a Mac. I know it's somewhere nearby. But if on Windows, if I go to the C drive, and I go under Users, and I go under My Name, there's my GIMP 2.6 folder. And you can see this all lining up here across the top. So it's just C, users, and whatever your name is, whatever your username. And then you have GIMP 2.6. And then inside of here, you'll find a patterns folder. And you can already see my copy of the plaid pattern in here. Once you have saved that into this location, restart GIMP. Which I'm not going to do on my end, but you will need to do because we're going to be using the paint bucket to drop down a pattern, and once you restart GIMP, that pattern will now magically appear for your use here inside your pattern selection. So it's just a nice way for everybody to be able to make the same kind of shirt that I'm going to make. Okay. So, it looks like everybody is doing okay. Let me just request a ready check for everybody who is ready. If you're not ready, please adjust your status accordingly. For the most part, it looks like people are just fine here. If you're a Photoshop user, congratulations, you were able to open that. Just go down to your, was it the edit menu, or is it the image menu, and just choose define pattern, and you were already done, like, I don't know, half an hour ago. But that's Photoshop for you. Okay, once you have this, Gav, did you want to say something?
No, it's okay.
Okay. Once you have this, it's time for us to move on, and it looks like we're pretty much good to go here. And I'm not seeing a whole lot of questions appearing over inside the webinar. So the next thing I'm going to do is create a brand new layer, and I'm going to set this fill type to transparency. I'm not going to worry about naming it. There's just no point right now. Then I'll name it. So I'm not going to name it in the window. And we're going to call this body. Now here's how easy this is actually going to be for everybody, all right? I'm going to grab my lasso tool, or the free select tool. It's a picture of a lasso, but it should be over in your toolbox. Now this is a nice tool, even for you Photoshop people, because it is a combination polygon and lasso select tool. So if you're just clicking, it's just like the polygon select tool. If you're dragging, it allows you to draw.
Is there a magnetic lasso?
Not that I'm aware.
Not that you'd want it for this.
No, no. All right, so what I want you to do is select the pieces that define the body. So just draw a little lasso around those, one way or another. You can click, you can drag, whatever makes you happy. Once you have that selected, go over to this body layer that we created. I want you to right-click on it and choose Add Layer Mask. A cute little window is going to pop up, and it should be pretty obvious which one of these options you want to choose, because you can initialize the layer mask to white, black, the alpha channel, all this other stuff. We want selection. That's why we just went through all that effort of making a selection. So we can choose selection from the box and click OK. Now, the reason we do that is because it makes the creation of our texturing much, 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 much easier. Because now we can just grab this great big open area, get our paint bucket tool, choose the color we want the body to be. So I'm going to choose this shade of yellow. You can choose anything you want. Just make sure over on your layer, if you take a look at your layer right now, you can click on the layer mask and you can click on the actual layer itself. Do not click on the layer mask. Click on the actual layer. Before I click anything in the document, though, I want to deselect. I'm going to hit Control-Shift-A A to deselect. You can also just go into the select menu and choose none if you need to. Now with that done, if I just click out here, boom. Now in this case I filled in with a pattern, which I don't necessarily want to do, but it gets the point across. Let me hit undo. I want to do the foreground color and click, and there we go. So what we're doing is we're filling the entire layer with this one color, but we're constraining it with the layer mask. The reason I'm doing that is pretty straightforward. It just means that later on, if I want to change the color of my character to anything, I can just choose that color and click and just drop it down. And it's a really fast update.
And you can think of that just like literally like cutting a piece of paper out.
Yep.
It will only be where the white is.
Now, I would like very much to get a ready check from people who are to this point right now. So if you're following along, and you would please update your ready system so I know that you're with me right now, that would be fantastic. In fact, I just want to make sure everybody's paying attention to me. Everyone, right now, set your status to not ready. Everybody who's following along. I don't care what you're doing. I don't care where you are. I don't care if you're further along than I am. Set your status to not ready right now. Everybody. I want to see nothing but red all the way down the board. And I'm going to...
I have.
You do have nothing but red?
No, I've set myself to not ready.
Oh, okay. And while you guys do that, I'm actually going to open up another browser for BuzzNet because I think things were getting a little wonky for me.
It has been mentioned, I'll mention it on the video, which is that people have been saying that Firefox seems to handle BuzzNet better than certainly IE appears to. I can't speak for Chrome, but I imagine you tested it on Chrome quite extensively. But yeah.
Yeah, well, right now I'm not even able to connect to it, so there's a great big high five to certain...
Hey, Nelson!
Yeah, hey, Nelson. When you go over to the piece of custom software we use to run the class and the piece of custom software doesn't even load, then you know you got an issue, right?
He's elite.
Yeah, I just needed to give me my login details. There we go.
I'll say this again, but if there is something you need Zach to see, you're far better off putting it in the webinar questions panel.
Okay, good. I see nothing but red. Now, everybody who actually is ready, set your status to ready. Good, good. This is great. Just what I want to see. I did get a question. It said, I have the lasso around my body, then what? Watch carefully. As the time gets later and later, folks, I am going to have to start asking people to just take notes and then follow along with the video, because this is a pretty lengthy class, and we still have a ways to go. I'm just kind of reminding everyone. So I'm going to create a brand new layer. I'm going to grab my lasso tool and make my selection. Then, over on the layer that I created, I'm going to right-click, go down to Add Layer Mask, and initialize the layer mask to Selection, and click Add. Once I've done that, I'm going to hit Control-Shift-A, and that's going to deselect everything. And on the layer itself, I'm going to grab the paint bucket. Now, when I say the layer itself, notice over on the layer, you can choose the layer mask or the layer actual data. We don't want to do the layer mask, so make sure you have the layer selected. Click, and that drops down your color. No problem. Somebody said, is there a keyboard shortcut in GIMP to pan the image? And that's just holding down spacebar. You don't have to use the mouse at all. And that takes a second to get used to if you're a hardcore Photoshopper, but that's how it works. Just hold down space, and you're moving. Please ask official questions over in the question panel, though.
Mohammed just did, he's corrected himself. How did you quickly change the color?
Oh, yeah, well, that's easy. If you have the layer selected, just choose your new color. Choose the most obnoxious shade of whatever that is I can find, and grab my paint bucket and then just click. Because you're filling the entire document, but you're constraining it using the layer mask, which is what keeps things nice and fast. Okay, so now what I want to do is do the same thing for the remaining pieces of the character. So check it out. We've got the shirt. Okay, we know the shirt needs to be one color, so I'm going to grab a new layer. Now check it out. To make a new layer, watch this. We have our new layer button I've been clicking. Hold down Shift and click on that, and it just makes a blank one that's ready to go. Let's also name these. I need to rename this body because I deleted that a second ago. We're going to name this one shirt, and I want to be really careful to make sure I don't misspell that. Let's grab our lasso, and I'm just going to grab the pieces of the shirt, not the collar. And also not the button in this case. That's just me. Really, in the end, if you make little variations on your texture, then bravo to you. That's perfectly fine in my book. In fact, the texture we're going to make is very, very simple. And if you'd like to make yours a little more complex by painting on little designs and things, I encourage that. Now, this little folded up piece of cloth that goes at the front of the collar needs to be included as well. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and drag a little lasso around that as well. So both of those are selected.
Do you need to hold down Shift for all of that second lasso step? Or
no, just when you initialize it.
Click.
Good question. Only
right,
just
cool.
when you initialize it, and then you're good. Robert Preston says, okay, now I'm not getting any transparency. I'm not entirely sure what you mean. Robert, would you like me to take a look at your screen?
That's a great answer.
Okay, I repeated the steps and now it's good. Okay. All right, well, now that we've got this selection, same thing, just right-click, add a layer mask, initialize it to selection, then just choose your layer and choose the color you want the shirt to be, which I'm going to go with kind of obnoxious, loud pink. Because, I mean, the guy's a golfer. He can get away with it, right?
It's like being at Disneyland.
Yeah. And boom, there you go. Now, in this case, I hadn't cleared my selection, so you'll see that everything only got painted within that selection. So I'm just going to click one more time and just fill the entire thing. You can't tell anyway because of the layer mask. Okay, so now moving along, I am going to create... yeah, that's really unnecessary.
Sorry, it just made me laugh.
Yeah, let's go ahead and add another layer on top. And this one will be specifically for the collar. And I'm going to choose just a lighter shade of pink this time, so not quite white, so somewhere right about there. We need to make our selection, so I'll grab my lasso tool and just kind of carefully walk along the inside of the collar. Okay, looking good. And we need to make another layer mask. Add that. Deselect with Control-Shift-A once more. Grab our layer, and we'll just drop in our lighter shade of pink. And I'm going to go even a shade higher than that. All right, so things are looking pretty good so far. Now we need to do the hat. So holding down Shift again, I'm going to create a new layer. At least you get to see this step over and over again, so if you're having problems, it's pretty straightforward. You just have to do it a few times. Let's create a hat layer. And we'll make our selection for the hat.
If nothing else, it brings home the importance of naming your layers.
Yeah. And once again, right-click, add a layer mask. Jump over here to the layer. Deselect everything. We need to choose our color, which I'm going to go with kind of a light brown. And we'll just dump that in.
Christian has said, how can I add to the layer mask? I forgot one piece.
Oh, no problem. Just, you'll notice that earlier I said you could select the layer or you could select the layer mask itself. If you select the layer mask and you grab your paintbrush tool, which is under the P key to get to it really, really fast, you can just continue painting. So if you need to maybe add another area. Now do make sure, if you're doing this, that you're painting with white. So set your colors, your foreground color, to pure white, and then you can just paint that on anywhere you need it to be. So if you forget a part, choose the appropriate layer mask and paint white in the area you forgot, and that works too. As a matter of fact, this whole thing that I'm doing with the lasso tool is really just a way to kind of have a shortcut. If you wanted to, you could clear that out, which I just did with Control A and then hit Delete. And you could just take this layer mask, grab your paintbrush tool, and just paint all this in manually if you really wanted to. There's nothing that says you can't just scribble on these colors however you want. I just figured it would be faster for all parties involved if we handled it using the lasso tool. But the neat thing about this is don't be afraid in this case to paint your own stuff on there. Like if you want stripes or something down the middle of your hat, then by all means just pick a different color and paint in where you want those stripes to be. So I'm doing this really as kind of a secret way to help a couple of folks catch up.
Are there shortcut keys to make the brush bigger at all?
It should be the left and right bracket key, just like Photoshop.
I just thought I'd give you an excuse.
Yeah. And there we go. So now the hat is filled in too. Also, give yourself a little room around those gaps. While this may or may not cause problems to have really snug fitting texture inside of Blender, you can run into some issues in some game engines. If MIP mapping is turned on, as you start to get too far away from your texture, you can start to see the seams. Just food for thought. Okay, so let's see. The next thing I want to do is a layer for the irises. So shift-click. I'm going to start moving just a little bit faster, guys, so bear with me, please. We still have just a little bit left to cover before I can call things.
While you're doing that, is the background layer in GIMP a special layer like it is in Photoshop?
No,
or is it just
it's
a normal
not. It's
layer?
just a layer. We'll add a layer mask, jump over here, deselect everything, and I'm just going to grab blue, but of course you can make the eyes any color you like. And there we go. And I guess the last thing I really need is the eyebrows. So we'll make a new layer. And we'll call this eyebrows. And we'll grab our lasso tool. Like so. Add a layer mask. Set it to selection. Deselect everything. And let's see here. Let's just make these kind of a darkish brown color. I'm going to desaturate them a little bit. Okay, so there we go. We have the diffuse colors pretty much set. I think I still need to do black for the pupils. So let's do that. Let's create a new layer for the pupils. I'll just call this pupils. And I'm not even going to worry about a layer mask in this case. It's such a simple thing that all I'm going to do is get over here and grab my paintbrush tool with the P key. I'm going to select default colors, so I'll just do black and white. And I'm just going to paint a swath of black right over the pupils and call it even. Because I don't see myself really needing to change the color of the pupils anytime soon. Okay, everybody who is up to this point, please update your ready status for me.
While they're doing that, what was the shortcut for the when you create a new layer to have it filled with the pattern?
Well, if you just click on New Layer, I see what you're saying. I didn't actually have one that was filled with a pattern. Earlier on, I used the paint bucket, and the paint bucket can be set to foreground fill, background fill, or pattern fill, which is something we're going to make use of here in just a few moments.
Yeah, but each time you've created a new layer, it's come in with that plaid pattern on.
Has it? No, sir. They've been transparent. That's just your transparency checker.
Oh, You're
being a little daft, but it's okay.
Well, it's because you created a plaid, and I thought of that.
Yeah.
With that size of thumbnail.
Okay. Look, texture. Not to get all interior designer on you or anything, but checker is not equal to plaid. Okay, I'm just saying.
It is when it's only 9.5 pixels.
All right. I'll let you slide this one time. Okay, I'm going to pause the video while people catch up. All right, we are back, and everybody has pretty much caught up. There's still maybe a couple of folks who still need to clean a few things up. It was pointed out over the break that the little button has not received any sort of color, nor have the whites of the eyes, but we have a white background. So that's going to work out just fine for us. What we need to do at this point is get our pattern into place. So to do this, I'm going to use kind of a trick. I'm going to grab this layer that the shirt's on, and I'm going to right-click, and we're going to duplicate this layer. So we have shirt copy. I'm going to call this shirt, or something close to it, shirt pattern. Now on the layer side of things, I'm just going to hit Control-A, delete. So I just have a new clean layer that happens to have the exact same layer mask. Now you remember that plaid pattern we created earlier? Grab your paint bucket, set it over to pattern fill. In your pattern chooser, you should find that guy, but you can grab any pattern that you want. It's not important that you use the plaid one. But just dump that in. Now, of course, that washes over and we lose our color, and that's not exactly what we want. So, with that layer selected, up at the top of your Layers panel, you can change the blend mode, and we're going to set that over to soft light. And now we have this lovely pink plaid style. Oh, and GIMP crashed. Everyone, please remember to save your work and save often. GIMP, like any other piece of software, now, I'll admit, I've never had it crash on me, but it does happen.
It's worth pointing people, even if you're using GIMP, towards the Photoshop lessons. Certainly.
Oh, sure.
Because
the concepts
all
are still
the descriptions
there.
Of the layer, the modes,
Blend
I
modes.
was just thinking of, particularly. Yeah, all of that will remain the same. That is physics for you.
Yeah. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing for the collar as well. So the collar can have a little plaid pattern on it. So I'm just going to take the collar. If you didn't see what I did last time, I got to do it again anyway. So we'll take the collar, right-click, and duplicate the layer. We'll name this collar pattern. We will delete out everything that's in the layer, not the layer mask. The layer mask we're actually going to use. Grab our paint bucket and just drop in our pattern. But then take that new layer and set its blend mode over to soft light once again. Now, there's only a couple of other things I really want to do here. I'm going to take the body, and we're going to do something very similar. I'm going to right-click and duplicate the body layer, delete out what's inside the layer itself. But then I'm going to go under Tools and jump over to GEGL operations. And underneath this, these are all just some various pixel operations you can apply to your image. If you scroll under these, you're going to see Perlin noise. And I'm going to give you all a very quick heads up. Do not touch these sliders. And now that I say that, I'm going to actually show you why, at least at the time of this recording. Watch this. You would think that these sliders allow you to change things like the alpha, the scale, the Z offset, and all these other things that generate this noise. I mean, and you'd be pretty much right if you thought that's what they did. But watch this. If I take the Z scale and I nudge it a little bit, my numbers go insane, right? And basically, we just get this black result, which might be driving my computer insane right now. So if my voice just got really weird, then that doesn't surprise me. But I want to show you something. Watch this. I'm going to copy this number out of that field. And just for your edification, I'm going to open up Notepad. Here's Notepad, and here's that number. If anyone would like to take a gander at what you would call this number, but I have no idea, and I have no idea why the sliders do that. So don't use the sliders, basically, is what that amounts to.
Whoever programmed the sliders liked the big int type.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and jump back over to Perlin Noise. Now, the little up and down arrows for changing the values, these work just great. So by all means, put those to some good use. What I'm going to do is take the scale and increase it just a little bit, say to about 3.80, and just click OK. And that just adds a layer of noise on top of everything.
Does numerical input work?
It does, but I don't expect anybody to really know a good number to try. But by all means, yeah, play with the numbers as much as you want. Just don't play with those sliders. All right, now I'm going to take the blend mode here and also set this over to soft light. And all it's doing is just giving some noisy variation to the color of our character's skin. You can also adjust the opacity to control how much of that variation is going to be present. All right, now the last thing I'm going to do is basically the same thing once again for the hat. So if you lost how I did the noise, you get to see it one more time. I'm going to right click and duplicate the hat layer, take what's inside the layer itself and delete it out. Then jump over to Tools, go back over to GEGL Operation. We'll jump back into Perlin Noise once again. And I'm going to increase the scale just once. And click OK, because it does have kind of a fabric-y sort of look. It's not perfect, but it's something to look at that's not just pure, flat, uniform color. We're going to set the blend mode for this over to multiply and then pull the opacity down to somewhere around 30%. So it's just a different way to go. And once again, that's blend mode of multiply, opacity to somewhere around 30%. And somebody asked, how did you do the pupils again? That was easy. I just created a blank layer, and I just painted black. So over here in your toolbox, if you set your foreground color to black just by dragging all the way down in the corner, click OK. Get your paintbrush tool, so just the P key, and then just paint a swatch over where the pupils should be. And that's all I did. Somebody else says, could you please show how you delete the content of the layer? Sure thing. If I grab any old layer, let's say the collar layer, I can right-click and let's just duplicate that. Now notice, once again, you can select the layer mask and you can select the contents of the layer itself. With the contents selected, Control-A, delete. Goodbye. All cleaned out. And I'll go ahead and throw away that layer, which you can do by clicking on the trash can button in the lower right-hand corner of the layer panel. Now here's the trick, ladies and jelly spoons. Once you have this done, you are finished with the basic texture. You do not have to stop here if you don't want to, but for the purposes of following along in this class, I'm going to ask you to. If you wanted to go back in and paint any sort of extra details in, there's plenty of time and plenty of resolution to do that. But I just wanted to show you how to get some basics down. Really, to me, the important thing here is showing the workflow, not necessarily the most amazing technique to create the most amazing texture ever. It's important to me that you guys see the process of laying out these UVs, getting them nice and flat, getting them loaded up into a 2D image editing software, and laying down some color so that you can determine what objects are going to be what color. That's the big thing I want you to be able to handle when you leave here. Real quick, and I realize this the video itself is already 3.5 hours, which means we've been here for a while, almost 5 hours now. So way to go for the folks who are sticking it out with me. But just give me a quick something over in BuzzNet, just a yes or no, if you feel like you've learned something so far today.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Iron Soul hasn't.
Iron Soul hasn't.
He knew it all already.
Now, I'm just curious, Iron Soul. Do you feel like you? I mean, I have no idea of knowing if people are being silly or whatever. So he says, seriously, though, I'm learning everything. So, yes. Okay. Well, if you're having a hard time following along, please do go back and check the recorded version of this, which I will give you a heads up. There may be a brief delay while that gets up because I'm here by myself right now. Okay, so now that we have this, we need to save it out. Here's how we're going to do this. File. So, hang on a second. Before we do anything, before we save, turn off your character UVs. If you don't, your character is going to look like they have a wireframe laid over them, which is fun. If you need that effect, it's a great way to get a wireframe visible on your character, real quick and easy.
I was going to say, is that the easiest way?
It's one of them. I mean, if you don't want to write a shader that actually looks for pieces of geometry, it is a quick and dirty way to get it done.
The other way I've tried it was with a square texture that's
that's normalized. Normalized to all the faces. Sure.
Yeah.
All right. So now that we've got that, let's go to File. Save as, and I'm going to call this ball character class, and then this will be diffuse. And I don't want an XCF file. I'm actually going to save this out as a JPEG image and click save. And we get a warning, says your image should be exported before it can be saved as JPEG for the following reasons. JPEG can't handle transparency, so you want to flatten the image. So we'll go ahead and export it, and that's fine. Quality of 85 should be fine for what we've got. Go ahead and click Save. And there we go. We have a texture that we can now apply to our ball. Iron Soul says, the only thing I need to get sorted is this pattern business. Now let me ask you something, Iron Soul. And somebody, I'm cutting two different directions. Where the $$ is BuzzNet. And that's over at buzznet.3dbuzz.com. Once again, that's buzznet.3dbuzz.com. You just need to log in with your 3D Buzz credentials, and there you go. Robert Preston, who I'm assuming is Iron Soul, I could be wrong. He says, I missed applying the patterns. How was that done? Wheel, it's pretty straightforward. You just need to open up that pattern that I gave you. And did you see, I'm assuming that you were able to download that. It's over in the member sponsor section for additional content. And I've since closed my browser, but I can open it back up and show you real quickly. If you go to 3dbuzz.com and go to forums and go to the member sponsor lounge, and then go under streaming video support files, and then go under the link on the first thread. And underneath Blender, you'll see the Plaid file. So make sure you download that, and you open it inside of GIMP. This is what it looks like. You're just simply going to go to File, Save As, set the file type to a GIMP pattern. Did I say Blender earlier and I meant to say GIMP? I'm probably going to do that all day.
No.
Well, set this to a GIMP pattern. That'll be the important thing. And then it needs to be placed in a specific location for you. In Windows, and that's the only thing I can really speak for. This is under C, Users, your username, GIMP 2.6, and there's a Patterns folder. Save it in there. Then restart GIMP. Once you do that, you'll be able to find the pattern underneath your Patterns menu. And you see I've actually got 2 copies of it in here.
And Heinrich.
Okay, now one more second, just one more moment. Now, the next part of the process is thus. I'm going to take my shirt pattern layer and I'm actually going to nuke it out so you can see this one more time. So we're going to take our shirt color layer, right-click on it, duplicate it, select the contents of the layer, not the layer mask, but the contents of the layer, and hit Control-A, delete to wipe those out. So we have just a blank layer. We don't really have to do that. It's just good practice. Then, grab my paint bucket, make sure it's set to pattern fill, and that I see the plaid layer, and just go ahead and click and drop that in. We're almost done. With that layer selected, take your mode, which is actually blend mode, and set that to soft light, and there you go. Oh, and Blender A asked, what is $$? Somebody was editing out some curse words over in the question section. So I just pronounced the symbols they used. Heinrich said, why JPEG instead of PNG? Why not? It'll be a little bit smaller, and for something this simple, it'll be just fine. And how did you apply the pattern to the shirt? I think that's been covered now, Johan. So we should be good to go, I'm thinking.
Yeah, he asked that just before you did it.
Yeah, so that should be all good. So now we've got this saved out. Let's take ourselves back over to the mighty, mighty Blender. And I don't want to see the image editor at the moment. Actually, well, you know, strike that. We could. Let me show you something. Let's do this. If I... No, okay. I'm sorry. We're gonna handle this a different way. Let's just close out the image editor for now. I don't need it. If we need it again, I'll just open it up later. So here's what we're looking at. If you see anything different, maybe something like this, that's just fine. What we're gonna do is go over to the Materials panel. And yeah, absolutely, Iron Soul. If you're having a hard time catching up, yeah, just move on with what you have right now. It's so easy to add that pattern in later and then just reload the file over in Blender. As a matter of fact, like if you edit it inside of GIMP and save it and then reopen Blender, it'll just come along for the ride. You should be good to go. Unless you have packed it into your blend file, in which case you need to unpack it and reload it. But that's okay. I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so over here inside of our material, I'm going to create a brand new material. It's pretty straightforward. I'm not going to really do anything to change this around. We're just going to leave it just like it is. Jump over to the Textures tab and create a new texture. Now, this is all stuff that was handled over inside of Blender Fundamentals, so I'm not going to spend all day showing you each and every little thing inside this window. Under Type, again, that's under Type. I want you to click on Image or Movie. Then that gives you the ability to see underneath Image, you have an Open button. Open. Underneath Textures, you should have your class Diffuse and your class PNG, which, yeah, I probably should have been consistent with my file types, but that's all right. In this case, it's not going to matter much. So I'm going to open up my Diffuse, and underneath our name area, we need to rename this. Right now it's just named Texture. Let's call this Ball. Actually, let's be really good. Let's say text_ball_diffuse. So now we can see what that is at a glance. We don't even need the thumbnail anymore. All right. We're not quite finished, though. We need another texture. So I'm going to grab this next texture slot. Go ahead and click New, and the same thing. We'll go to Type, Image, or Movie. Scroll down a little bit. Click Open, and this time we're going to bring in our Baked Ambient Occlusion. And let's go ahead and name this as well. We'll call this text_ball_AO. And it's because I'm holding down Shift and hitting backspace that it keeps doing that. Text_ball_AO. So there we go. Now currently both of these are mapped under color. If you scroll down under influence, they're both set to show color. And we don't necessarily want to do that. So I'm going to turn off color on both of them. So select one, turn off color, select the other one, scroll down, turn off color. If you don't see any results for your material, do not be alarmed by this. Actually, at this point, you're not supposed to. Because all I really wanted to do there was get those textures into my file. I want to mention something real quick. I'm going to say it now. I'm going to try to repeat myself later, but it's important that everybody sees this. Any texture that you are using inside of Blender, you see there's a little source line here underneath the image? You get this little button that says pack an image as embedded data into the blend file. It is important that you do this, because only by doing this do you have the ability to just send your textures along with your submission without having to send a separate file. Now, if you would like to zip up your textures along anyway, I'm going to ask that folks do that just in case they forget, because I'm not going to count on everybody to hit that. But if you want everything to be in one Blender file, that little piece of paper means that this texture is currently attached. It's embedded in your blend file, which is a great little feature. So if we edit the image after it's packed, will it auto-update? No. You're going to, you notice you got a little reload button here that's grayed out. You're going to need to unpack it, and just remove the pack, and then you can reload it, and then just pack it again. And Miranda just said, is the class still going? I made a point not to join because I thought I slept through it. No, it's still going on. It's been going on for right at, 4.5 hours. We lost half an hour to slightly late.
Many days.
Yeah, it's been going on for weeks now. So yeah, welcome. Okay, now I'm going to jump back over to my material right now. And I'm going to tell this guy to use nodes. And this is where things start to get a little bit fun. I need to name this material too. Let's call this ball underscore material. And I'm going to make sure that this is nicely assigned and everybody's looking all good. Okay. Now, here's where stuff starts to get fun, and this is where those of you who are really new to this whole thing might scream at me a little bit. Because now we're going to get into the node editor. What I want to do is a couple of things. I want to look right at my ball and hit Control-Alt-0 and aim the camera right at him, because we'll probably be doing a few render tests as we move. I've split my UI up, and this other one we're going to turn into a node editor. And let's press F12. And we're probably still calculating ambient occlusion, which we don't need to do, so let's go ahead and turn that off. And now when we press F12, we should get a much faster response. And we do, which is great. Okay. So now, let's take a look at the node editor. Is everybody with me right now? I'd like to see some ready checks, so update your ready status. Control-Alt-0 is not working. Are you on a Windows machine? Oh, make sure it's 0 on the numpad. Please make sure it's 0 on the numpad. If you don't see any nodes, you need to have your object selected, and you need to have gone into your material window and made sure that you have nodes checked. So you need to hit the little button, Use Shader Nodes to render the material. That will be important. And I'm actually going to split this again. What were we going to say, Gav?
Nothing particularly relevant. I was just saying it's like being back in Houdini again.
Yeah, I reckon. And I'm going to kill out that image. We don't really have to do that. I just don't want to confuse anybody.
Actually, that's something that took me some getting used to, was the fact that that is the window that it renders.
Yeah. Yeah, it will kind of throw you off. Okay, so now, let's see. Darn this Blender, it stopped responding. I mean, it's running, but it ignores my commands. Yeah, definitely try pressing escape and see if you've got something that is blocking you in the background. How did we disable the calculation of AO? The same way you turned it on, but in reverse. If you go over to your world panel, you'll see your ambient occlusion group here. Just uncheck ambient occlusion, and you'll start getting much faster renders. How do you swap the material over to nodes? If you check in your materials panel, there is a little button for it. It looks like two little nodes that are wired together, and that's where you do it.
Yeah, you just turned it off.
Yes, I did. It should go black right now. That's how you know that you're there. Now it's just mucking up my camera. Iron Soul is having a real issue with his camera right now. If you need to, I don't know what you see through your rendered camera, you can work in reverse. You can move whatever it is you have in front of your camera if you're unable to do it, or you can always move your camera manually. There's nothing that says you can't just take your camera and wiggle it around to where it needs to be. Camera doesn't even appear. Do you have a camera in your scene? If you hit Shift-A, do you need to add a camera? So definitely keep that in mind. Okay, now I think with all of that looking good, let me turn this over to textured solid. And I'm just playing with buttons here real quick. So let me go ahead and stop doing that. So now let's take a look at setting up our nodes for our texture. The first thing I'm going to do is we've got some controls here for the specularity, for our color. We have our output node. The output node is what we're actually going to be rendering. And we can use various output nodes in our material to kind of test things out. So the first thing I need to do is bring in our texture. So I'm going to hit Shift-A to add. And under the input menu, choose texture.
Sorry, how did you bring that menu up?
Shift-A, just like in the 3D view.
Sorry, being brain shut down.
No problem. All right, now you can click on the little texture field down here underneath at the very bottom of this node, and we're going to set this to Text Ball Diffuse. Now we're going to take this and plug the color into, excuse me, into the color of our material. Oh, and I currently don't have my material actually set up here, so over in my material panel, just go ahead and click New. Or you can just set it. You can set it over to. Hang on. Let me just start over. Watch this. Let me just back all the way up. I'm going to go all the way back to where things started. So I'll just nuke out everything. Okay. So we have our material, which is set to using nodes. Let's just add everything in manually. I'm going to hit Shift-A, and we will bring in a material input node. So under Inputs, choose Material. And under this, you have your little material selector. I'll go ahead and zoom in, make this a little easier to see. You can choose your ball material. Next, we need an output. So I'm going to hit Shift-A, Output, and you only have one option there, so we'll bring in an output node. Now just take the color from the material and plug that into the yellow color input for the output, and there you go.
Is that a drag, or do you click on the output?
It's just a drag. If you just click, you won't get anything. So drag it over and plug it in.
Okay.
Okay, so now we need to bring in our texture. So I'm going to hit Shift-A again, bring in Input, Texture. And if we take a look at our texture panel over here, we can see these as well.
If you could zoom back in on the node editor a bit, it would help.
Hang on just a second. I'm trying to make the most of a very low resolution blender.
Yeah, no, I realize that. It is very...
Sure.
It was very...
And I can set the texture here over to Text Ball Diffuse. Now, I like to adjust my brightness on that to kind of clean that up a little bit, because it is pretty harsh. Usually around 0.7 looks pretty good. And that's over underneath your texture. And so if you look in your Properties panel, under Textures, if you scroll down, you have Colors, and you can adjust the brightness down a little bit, because usually it's going to come in a little bit over bright. Now, we want to take the color of this texture and plug it into the color of our material. And you see how that works. And if we hit a quick F12, that's not actually rendering out. So let me see what's going on here.
Did you switch over to single texture rather than multi-texture?
Well, it shouldn't matter much, because that shouldn't affect the render at all.
Did you set that to be the active texture on the ball?
Also, well, I should be doing that through here. Well, actually, hang on a minute. I'll bet it's not going to do... Well, we still got a little bit to go anyway, but I'm hitting F12, and I feel like I should be seeing something right here, and I'm not. Oh, and there it is. I nuked out my lamp earlier and totally forgot. It still doos all over it.
Well, we can cut in my question from earlier when it didn't matter and put it in there.
Yeah, why not? Why not?
You'll need a lamp at this point.
Yeah, you'll need a lamp at this point. That's me talking for like 5 hours straight and totally losing track of the entire planet.
Oh, you're doing a good job, man.
So now let me set up a quick lighting system. So I brought in a lamp, right? But as you'll see, one lamp looks a little funny. So I'm going to kind of lighten up the scene a little bit by adding a few of these. I'm going to hit Shift D. So we'll do one up high, one down low, and then one kind of in the middle behind everything. And I'm just using Shift D to create those. Let me just press F12 again. And there we go. And this is exactly what I expect to see when I render right now.
That's like Mondrian or someone.
Yeah. Okay, so back over here with this guy. Now, here's the trick. We have a texture feeding our material, feeding our output. Everybody update your ready status real quick. Folks who are at this point. Okay, that's pretty good overall, given the number of people who've been actually updating that. Now, here's the thing. We don't have any way of telling our node system just yet how our UVs are laid out. To do that, we need to bring in a new node. So I'm going to hit Shift-A, bring in our input geometry node. And I'm just going to take our UVs and plug those right into the vector. Now, it does allow you the ability on the geometry node to choose what UV map you're talking to. So we can go ahead and set that to our default one, which is UV map. That is really important if you're using multiple UV maps for different textures. But once you have that in place, press F12 again, and there you go. Okay, so now we've got the basis of our color in. Now, I'm not going to be making a very complicated material, so I'm going to take my specularity and just pull it down to a dim gray. And that's going to make our character a lot less shiny. So if I render again, he's kind of muted now. But now we need to bring in our ambient occlusion. Because we've got it, but we're not using it for anything. So next thing is I'm going to press Shift-A, bring in a new input node, texture, and I'll set the texture to textball AO. Now before I even hook it in, already this also has to follow those UVs, so we know straight up that we can take that UV connection and plug it right into the vector. But how do we combine the colors of our diffuse texture with the colors of our ambient occlusion? Well, there's a node for that. We'll hit Shift-A, color, and go over to mix. For you Maya people out there, this is a combination, multiply, divide, add, subtract, blend node. It's all in one, really. We're going to set this over to multiply. So once you add your mix node, now notice it changes the name of the node, and I don't really like this because it's really confusing if you're not already really familiar with Blender. This is a mix node when you create it, but as soon as you take its settings over to multiply, it changes over to a multiply node. So just be aware of that. Oh yeah, also I want to mention this, if you are just starting to play around with Blender for the first time, these networks of nodes are known as noodles.
No, please.
I'm sorry. They are. They really are. I didn't make that up. Okay, so check this out. I'm going to unplug my color. leave it floating out there in space. We're going to take the color from our diffuse texture and plug that into color 1. Take the color from our ambient occlusion and plug that into color 2. But I'm going to make sure to take this factor number and set it all the way up to 1. What this factor number does is it controls how much of color 2 you're actually using. We can use this to fine-tune our ambient occlusion, but go ahead and start it at full strength. So crank that all the way up to 1. Then take the output color of your multiply, plug that back into color, and render again. And that looks really messy. I'll have to figure out why. Text ball. Oh, what do you want to... Hang on. Let me see which texture I'm actually using here. Yeah, this is the wrong one. This is from an earlier version. You can see the collar is a little bit out of whack. So that's not a problem. All I need to do is unpack this. So we'll remove the pack. You guys won't have this problem on your end. I've baked this out like 17 times in preparation for this class. So that's kind of what I'm fighting with. What I wanted was ball character class AO. And that's a different texture, as you can see here. We'll go ahead and pack that in. Now let's try rendering once more. And everybody's happy.
Yay.
Now, I do want to throw this out there. You can use this to test and see what kind of result you're getting from your ambient occlusion. If you take your factor and set it down to 0 and render, here's what that looks like. Now watch this. Over in the image editor, I've got this set to slot 1. We can set this over to slot 2. Press F11, crank this all the way up, and render again, and now we can just jump between slots 1 and 2, and you can see those differences. Doing a great job of making the lighting look a lot more realistic without us having to do any extra lighting work, which is fantastic.
It just renders so quickly.
Well, it's because we're not calculating anything other than color right now. And just...
No, but Blender generally
just
seems to render so quickly.
Yeah. Okay, I want an update on readies for people to let me know that they are to this point. And just to make your lives easier, I'm going to show you all my network as zoomed in as I can. So I'll just kind of condense my nodes together.
Good time to print screen.
Yeah, if you are trying to follow along, it's not a bad time at all, really. Okay, we could be done here. I could call it right here, but I'm going to give you guys a... Do you guys want a treat or do you guys want to call it? Let me just ask, because we've been here for 5 hours and X number of minutes. Do you guys want one more treat, or are you guys ready to just get your homework and go home? All right. And it looks like that's pretty unanimous. And somebody says, my UV isn't working as expected. I have the same node set up, but it's like there is no UVs. Well, make sure under your geometry node that you've selected your UV map. That could be important. You have selected that, okay. And of course you're feeding out from your UV input, and that's going to be important as well. Then really, off the top of my head, I would have to look at your screen. Can I look at your screen? Just have a look. Sure, but I don't have a mic. That's okay. As long as you can follow my directions, I try to get you to do certain things I think will be okay. Hang on just a second as I remember how to use this whole GoToWebinar thing again. And let's see. I'm going to fail at pronouncing your name, so I'm actually not even going to try. It looks like Havard, but if I butchered that, you have my apologies. And if you could, just, when you're ready, show me your screen and let's see what you got. Okay, so there's your UV map. Things are looking a little funny. What happens when you render? Okay. With your character selected, go ahead and hit the Tab key to go into edit mode. Select everything. So just hit A. And I need to see your textures, your UVs right now. So if you could, over in your image editor on the left-hand side, just choose another texture. It looks any texture. If you click right next to render result, click the button there, yeah, and just choose one of the textures in there. There you go. Okay, so you've got some UVs laid out. That's the other thing I needed to double check. All right, over in your Properties panel, if you would, click on your Object Data tab. Properties, not that Properties, there you go, all the way over. It looks like the little triangle of vertices. It's 3 over from the one you just selected. There you go. Okay, you only have one UV map. That's also good. All right, if you would kindly take us back over to your node editor now. Okay, very nice. Let's see. I am not readily seeing why you're getting that issue, to be completely honest with you. So what I want to do is let me just kind of move forward from here, and then at the end of class, if you're still having the problem, just shoot me your file and I'll take a look at it, okay? That way we can kind of move forward from here. So I think that's probably the best way to handle it, with it being as kind of late as it is. So let's see here. Let me go ahead and set myself back to the presenter. Okay, and we're back. So now here's what we're going to do. Up to this point, we've got everything kind of laid out and looking mostly good for most of us, and we've got this. But this is what ambient occlusion looks like in a perfect black and white world. The shadows that you see in the crevices in the real world are practically never so nice and clean and just gray. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to set up a very simple network that will allow you to tint your ambient occlusion a little bit based on a selection of colors that you define. So here's how we're going to do that. Let me get out of here. First off, we need to establish what those colors are going to be. Well, I'll just tell you. We have green for the grass, we have blue for the sky. We're going to keep this very, very simple. And if later on you want to make it a little more complex on your own, you'll have everything you really need in order to do that. So to create those colors, we're going to start off just by making a ramp. So let me get over here. I'm going to hit Shift-A, go to Converter, and choose Color Ramp. This is just a gradient, just like in Photoshop. It's pretty easy to set up. So first off, we are going to take this. Oh, and I want to show you something else too. Just while I've got you here, before I even connect all this up, just leave this floating out here in space for a minute. You can create as many output nodes as you like. And you can just click on the one you actually want to see the result for. So now if I render this, this is all we see, which is a great way to kind of test what's going on. So now if I just click on, if I do like another one, let me hit Shift-D and I'll duplicate this node and I'll plug one into my ambient occlusion layer. I can click on this and render, and all I see is the result of ambient occlusion. So you can litter your network with these output nodes and really get a nice idea of what's going on at each stage along the way.
Johan's asking.
He says, can I still make changes to my object? I have just one eye now. Could I mirror it and get the second eye the same texture like the other eye? That should work, actually. At this point, it would work. It would be a little wonky if you did that right before you baked ambient occlusion, but at this stage of the game, that should be just fine. Okay, so I'm going to set up a quick ramp. I'll take my leftmost color, and I'm going to set this to some brilliant shade of green. And I'm going to take my right color, and I'm going to set this to a nice shade of sky blue. And I'll just kind of meet these guys together slightly off to the left. Now, if I take an output node, which I'm just going to duplicate an existing one with Shift-D, and then take the output and plug that in like so. Let's see what happens if we render. he just turns out blue. Part of this is because Blender doesn't really know where to put this ramp, how to apply it. What we're going to do is use the Orco connection. Now that's short for original coordinates, and it's pretty slick. I actually wish a few other programs had this. When I press F12 now, what we're doing is we're grabbing the original coordinates of the object in X and Y space. So let me see, if I rotate up here, let me see if I can find a good angle to show this off. There we go. So you can see we got a little blue patch here and everything else is green. It is being mapped, and the way it's being mapped is kind of like if this was a real grid with, like a 2D grid, with Y and X running basically in these directions. So let's...
I'm still confused.
I know, and I'm not really trying to turn this into a big long discussion of this, but this the Orco connection is essentially a way for you to tie into. It's not quite the local coordinates; it's the generated coordinates that would have come in automatically before you did any UV layouts whatsoever. It's if you told this to just use any generated UVs at any point, this allows you access back to those. For now, we're just going to kind of keep things pretty straightforward. We're just going to plug in and use that. But obviously, we've seen there's an issue with doing this because when we do, we're just getting a little bit of mapping over on one side of the character. Now, we're going to fix this by bringing in a mapping node. And this is where things get a little bit technical, so you might want to get a pen out and write some stuff down so you don't have to scrub for this later. Just warning. So I'm going to hit Shift-A, and I'm going to bring in a vector mapping node. Now check this out. If I just drag this right on top of that wire until it turns orange, it automatically gets wired in. The purpose of the mapping node in this case is going to be to offset the vector coordinates that Orco is using. Now I have some numbers that are already set up. You may use them or you may play with these kind of on your own, but even just by setting them just like this, let's go back to that above view and we'll render again. Everything's right, kind of right where it was. Now we're going to do some rotation. Actually, so we're going to do some location and some rotation editing. So if I take the location of this guy and we adjust, let's just set it to something like 1 for a moment. You see we've started to move it down a little bit. And let me come over here to the side. And you can see how that's starting to just kind of move the gradient across the body. But it's not perfect. We need to be able to rotate this around a little bit. So that's what we're going to do next. Now I feel like I should be able to see my material in my viewport right now. And I'm trying to figure out what I have broken to cause that not to happen.
Under your end menu, single texture. Do you need textured solid?
I probably
for that matter,
do.
GLSL.
I probably do. There we go. That's what I need to say. Thank you so much. My mind totally went blank. So make sure you check textured solid, and we're going to set this to GLSL, and that's under the end menu. And now we can see this kind of live, which will really make this a whole lot easier to see what we're doing. Now watch this. As I rotate this vector using my mapping, I can reposition that gradient across the surface. Now, I like to try to keep things relatively straightforward for as long as I can, so let me just kind of test things around a little bit. If I set this to 90, we just kind of flip that around. So I'm going to reset that back out to 0, and I'm just kind of rotating freely until I level this out across the character. And that's looking pretty good. It actually doesn't have to be super perfect. But you see how that works? Actually, I can take my location and slide that around as well, because really what I want is green down toward the bottom and then blue pretty much everywhere else. Now, let me know, does everybody see what I just did? You can tell me over inside of BuzzNet. If you're having a hard time grasping it, what has happened is that the original coordinates were mapping our texture in a really weird kind of way. As a matter of fact, let me just disconnect this and I can show it to you. It was cool, but it wasn't particularly useful. So if we plug in Orco straight up, here's what we were getting, just a little bit of blue off to the side. And we needed to manipulate the vector of that mapping. So we grabbed this mapping node, and just by adjusting our rotation and our location a little bit, we're able to completely redefine how that's being mapped across the surface. Yes, this is for the grass and sky tinting, exactly right. But this is only the first part of the puzzle, so to speak. Now, what we need, let me just show you this. Here's our ambient occlusion layer. All we're trying to do is tint the darker areas of ambient occlusion. What I'm going to do is do this at a straight through without going through a whole bunch of explanation. So I want you to just follow along. And then hopefully, if you kind of break down the math, it's really not that hard. But we do have to do some mathematical equations to these colors. The first thing we're going to do is get an inverted map of our ambient occlusion layer. We don't have to use GIMP for that. We can do it right here. I'm going to hit Shift-A. And we have color invert. It's a very simple node. It just takes in an input and gives you the reverse. So I'm going to take the color of my ambient occlusion texture and plug that in. And then let me get another output node here just so you can see this. We'll plug in an output and I'll click on this and here's what you get. Inverted ambient occlusion. Now I'm going to try to keep things nicely organized inside my window. Let me do a few things here. We don't need as much the properties window. We don't need to see too much here. We just need to be able to see the character. So if you'll pardon me while I just rearrange a few things to make this a little easier to see. And we'll pull the invert kind of out here. Okay, so we have our inverted ambient occlusion. Now we need to multiply the result of our ramp with this inverted ambient occlusion. So I'm going to hit Shift-A, color mix, just like we did before, and we're going to set this over to multiply. Take the output color of the color ramp, multiply it by the result of the invert, and set your factor all the way up. Now once again, I'm just going to duplicate out another output and show you what this looks like. So we have black across all of the generally lit surfaces, and in our shadows we have these bright colors, which at any point we can edit. If we want to see a little more green, just pull up some more green in your ramp. If you want to see a little more sky, just pull down a little more sky. If you need other colors, if for some reason you need a swath of red in there, just click Add, position it where you want it to be, and set it to red. I don't know why you'd want to do this, but you could. I'll just go ahead and take it right back out. Now, can anybody guess what we're going to do from here? I'll take the dead silence as no. We're going to add this back into our final result. So we've multiplied out the texture and the ambient occlusion layer. We've multiplied out the color ramp and the inverted ambient occlusion layer. Now we just need to add the two together. So I'm going to hit Shift-A, go to color, mix, and this time we're going to set this to add instead of multiply. We'll take the color from our original mix of ambient occlusion and diffuse. Then the result of our inverted ambient occlusion and our color ramp, set the factor all the way up for now. We're going to change that. And we'll plug that into our final color. And we'll unplug the specularity because we're not using that. And here's what we get. Now our shadows have this funky color to them. We just don't want to use all of that. But that's why it's so great that we have this factor value. We can set this all the way back down to 0 and then slowly bring it up to get just the right amount of tinting to keep those shadows from being perfectly black. And probably somewhere around 0.2 to 0.3 is going to look just fine. And that's it. That's the whole network right there. Now, if I was to go through and kill out all of my my output nodes, this does look a lot simpler. But before I do that, here's our diffuse. Here's our ambient occlusion. Here's our adjusted ramp that we moved around a little bit with the mapping node. Here's our inverted ambient occlusion. The way this works is we take this and multiply it by this, which gives us this guy. Then we take our ramp and our inverted ambient occlusion and we multiply the two together to get this. Then we take this guy and we add them, and that gives us this. We just simply take that final factor and we tweak it around a little bit until we get just the right amount of shading. And that's it. Now, just to make things a little easier to see, if you're just trying to get the network down, I'm going to get rid of all my excess output nodes. So we only have the one. Are there any questions? I'm not seeing any. And I've got one that says completely off topic. Well, you know, throw it out anyway, and then I'll tell you if I can answer it or not. Is there a way to draw a texture in GIMP and see it updated directly like Photoshop with Maya? The answer is yes, but it's not something we're going to be exploring here. Why is Mastering Unreal Volume 3 unavailable in Australia? Because it's unavailable in the entire world. The production of that book was actually canceled some time back. Okay, so with there being no more questions, let's talk homework. So what I'm going to do is jump us back over to Photoshop. It feels like days since we were looking at Photoshop, doesn't it? And I think Photoshop just locked up on me, which is going to be ironic if it just crashes out entirely. Nope, there it goes. Just took it a minute. Had to be patient. Okay, so now let's discuss homework.
It knows you've been fooling around with GIMP, you see.
Yep. Texture your character. And the golf club. Those are the two things I'm really looking for. The backdrop is going to be a complete no-brainer. We're just going to slap a single texture on that I'm going to supply to you, and I'm not going to worry about that till render time. The golf tee is, you can just slap a material on that and change the color to something that just looks like, you know, the pale brown of a golf tee, or a colored one if you use colored tees when you play golf. So I'm not too worried about that. None of those things require actual texture work, but the golf club will and the character will. I went out of my way to make sure we did the character in this video because the character is the harder part. You actually have the easier part to complete on your own, which is good. When you submit, so inside your RAR zip file, I'm going to call it a zip, but I understand it could be anything, right? I want to see your blend file. I want to see all of your textures.
Can I just make a specific request that these are inside a folder, inside a zip, i.e. the folder that they're in, you zip the folder, please?
Yes. And all of these...
Otherwise, they're just, I've ended up with about 50 different files called project.
Gav, if I could request that you write this all up into a post for me when we get done here today.
Oh, it is already on the website, but you know what it's like. People don't.
I know. Well, no. I mean, for this particular assignment, if you'd make a quick post when we get done here, just to outline this assignment. All I'm really looking for, folks, is that you texture the character and texture a club, put your blend file and all your textures into a folder, zip that, and send it along. If things are too big, if emailing makes you sad, if email equals sadness, then please remember Dropbox. No, not Drob. I can't. It's been a long day.
Dropbox.
Yeah, Dropbox.
We will give you Dropbox.
Yeah. Please remember Dropbox, and there are alternatives, I know, but Dropbox is quick, it's free, and it allows you to just send me a link right to your file, and everybody I know who has had email problems has been able to submit easily with Dropbox. There's been no issues whatsoever. If you would like, if you send me an email saying you'd like an invitation to Dropbox, I will invite you, and that will give you a little bit of extra space in your Dropbox account, and it'll actually give me some too. So if you're not already a member and you'd like, just email me, zach@3dbuzz.com, and I'll shoot you a Dropbox invitation that'll give you an extra 250 megs. Because by the free account, you just get 2 gigs by default. Now, that's all I'm looking for, really, is I want this stuff all textured. You may pack your textures into your blend file, but that doesn't change anything. I still want to see them included as a just-in-case. So if there is anything else, if there are any other questions, now would be the time. And let's see, does the golf ball need to be modeled, or can we just texture the dimples? By all means, just texture the dimples, if you'd rather do that. Can you make node editor longer so I can take a screenshot? Let me jump back over there and I'll show you the whole thing one last time. Here's the node editor. In fact, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to condense some things down without crossing nodes over too much so that I can zoom in as close as I can. And that looks pretty good, I think. So you should be able to take a screenshot of that, I believe, and hopefully that'll get you everywhere you need to get to get that done. And let's see. Yeah, I had the same problem. I now explain to the invitees to use a link in the invitation. Yes, absolutely. So anyway, if you are looking for extra space, you can just ask me for an invite and I'll send you one. If you don't want to bother, don't. If you have somebody else you want to give your extra space to, just email them instead. It's all fine to me. I just thought it'd be a nice way to help some folks out. So let's see. Does texture include the source file or just the textures used in the blend file? It just uses the textures you've actually applied in your blend file. And should you always bake texture to your model? I don't like saying always with anything. It can be really useful in certain instances, especially for games and whatnot. But if you're just staying in Blender doing a render out, you could leave your material just like this and everything will be fine. And let's see, maybe off topic, but we'll be going through bump maps in the 102. Well, we will take a look at more advanced texturing methods as we move forward. Let me just throw this out there. If you drop another material in here, and remember, every Blender object can have as many materials on it as you want, and you had a material that was just set aside with a bump map on it, you could bring that material in here on a node and plug it in. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. It's off topic, it's outside the scope, but it's pretty easy. Okay, so that is going to wrap things up for this class and for this video. Thank you all for attending. I know it was long, I know it was a bit arduous, but thank you all for sticking in there. I'm really impressed by how many people did stick in there, given that it's a Saturday. And I will see all of you guys next week. Take it easy.